There comes a strange silence after the storm. Not peace, not contentment, just silence. Like the world has gone still, and you are suspended in it, detached from your ambitions, unbothered by the noise, unmoved by the dreams that once kept you awake at night. And so begins the terrifying question, why do I feel nothing after everything? You've read the books, faced your inner demons. You've seen the ego for what it is, a fragile illusion built from fear and validation. You've tasted the cold truth that you are not your job, not your name, not your mind. And now, stripped of illusion, you're empty. Not broken, but barren. You're not lost, but you're no longer chasing anything either. This is not depression. This is not laziness. This is something else. Carl Jung understood this moment better than most. He called it the void of meaning that follows spiritual awakening, the desert that comes after the fire, a space where the old world has collapsed, but the new self has not yet emerged. It's the collapse of false desire, the unraveling of all the goals that were never truly yours. And what's left behind is a profound stillness that feels like apathy, like detachment, like the death of your motivation. But what if this was never a problem, but a passage? What if this emptiness wasn't the end, but the silence before a new beginning? Jung believed that spiritual awakening doesn't lead to happiness or endless energy, at least not at first. It leads to a dismantling of the persona, the masks we wear, the motivations we borrowed. And in that painful honesty, we lose the fuel that once powered our lives. Because now, you cannot lie to yourself. You cannot pretend that success will satisfy you. You cannot chase what you know is hollow. And so, you pause. In this video, we are going to explore why spiritual awakening seems to kill your motivation, and why this collapse is not a failure, but a sacred threshold. We'll draw on the insights of Carl Jung, exploring the stages of inner death and rebirth that so many experience but so few understand. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just about explaining your emptiness. It's about showing you that what feels like death is often the beginning of true life. Welcome to Psychra. When a person awakens spiritually, the first casualty is not their relationships, their job, or even their habits. It is their motivation, their fire to succeed in the way the world taught them. The ambition that once ran on validation, fear, and ego begins to flicker, then vanish. At first, this loss feels confusing, even disturbing. You begin to ask, why can't I push myself like I used to? Why do goals feel meaningless now? Why does life feel empty, even though I'm more aware than ever? Carl Jung would say, because you're no longer chasing shadows. In Jungian psychology, most people live from what he called the persona, the mask we wear to fit in, to be accepted, to win approval. This persona is not evil, it's necessary for social survival. But over time, we mistake it for our real self. And from that mask, we derive our motivations. We want to be the best, to prove ourselves, to be admired, to rise above, to escape shame, to feel whole. But awakening, true awakening, shatters that illusion. It breaks the mirror you've been polishing your whole life. And when it falls apart, your previous motivations dissolve with it. You stop caring about being seen as successful. You stop craving admiration. You stop performing. And then you're left in silence, staring at a blank page. This is where many panic. They try to resurrect the old self by forcing discipline, chasing new goals, recreating their past drive. But it doesn't work, because the soul refuses to run on lies once it has seen the truth. Jung called this enantiodromia, the phenomenon where a force, when pushed to its extreme, flips into its opposite. The ego, when stretched to the edge of awareness, collapses into the unconscious. Your identity, which once gave you purpose, now becomes your prison. And so, you abandon it. But what no one tells you is that this death of motivation is not just natural, it's necessary. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not unmotivated. You are simply being emptied to make space for the true self. The true self does not seek purpose in external outcomes. It is not driven by fear or status. It finds meaning not in success, but in alignment with your inner truth, your integrity, your wholeness. But the journey between the false self and the true self is brutal. It feels like floating in the void. It feels like nothing matters anymore, and that's because, to the ego, nothing does. To the ego, you are dying. And in a way, you are. You are shedding the skin you've worn your entire life. The skin made of other people's expectations, of culture, school, shame, and survival. And under that skin is something raw, silent, and sacred. Jung understood that before the soul can step forward, the ego must step aside. And the ego doesn't step aside gently. It fights, it starves, and it tries to drag you back into the hustle, into the world of proving and performing. This is why so many who experience spiritual awakening fall into a depression-like state. They think they've lost their drive, when in truth, they've simply outgrown their old fuel. You were once powered by ambition. Now you must be powered by truth. You were once moved by fear. Now you must be moved by love, or not moved at all. This transition is not comfortable. It's not glamorous. It won't be celebrated. You won't get applause for it. You might even feel like a failure. Because in a world obsessed with productivity, choosing stillness looks like giving up. But Jung would remind you, transformation always begins in the dark. The caterpillar does not evolve while running. It dissolves in the cocoon. Your cocoon is the stillness, the lack of motivation, the space between your old self and your becoming. It is not your job to rush this process. It is your job to endure it, to let the false desires burn away so that something deeper can emerge. You might still wake up feeling lost. You might still feel numb to what once inspired you. But trust this, if you're in the void, you are not failing. You are forming. And this formation will not come from willpower. It will come from surrender. Surrender to the fact that your old life is too small for your awakened soul. That's the painful gift of awakening. It doesn't give you a new purpose immediately. It removes every false one until only the truth remains. And that truth will give you a new kind of motivation. Not a motivation to conquer the world, but to live in alignment with who you truly are, quietly, deeply, and powerfully. The death of egoic motivation doesn't mean you stop moving. It means you begin moving from a different center. But until that new center stabilizes, you're in a kind of psychological freefall. And this is where most people suffer. Because we have been conditioned to believe that motivation is everything. That to stop striving is to decay. That to sit still is to rot. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed that what appears as stagnation is often the unconscious preparing for individuation, the process of becoming your most authentic, integrated self. And that process, like alchemy, begins with breakdown, chaos, and disorientation. The soul rearranges itself not in achievement, but in silence, in suffering, and in solitude. You must understand, the world taught you to move like a machine, to wake, work, win, to force outcomes through discipline, to pursue meaning through accomplishment. But the soul is not a machine. The soul is a forest. It grows in wild directions with no blueprint. It cannot be optimized. It must be allowed. So when your previous goals die, your soul is asking, can you still walk without a map? Can you still live without a label? Can you still breathe without the praise? This is the spiritual trial, to remain centered even when all outer meaning dissolves. In this silence, many encounter a hidden fear, that without motivation, they are nothing. This fear stems from a deeper wound, the belief that your worth is tied to your productivity, that if you are not producing, performing, achieving, you are failing. But Jung would say, this is the lie of the false self, and it must die. The ego ties your value to doing. The soul ties your value to being. And so, when you awaken, the soul begins to dismantle all the scaffolding of identity you've built. It takes away your trophies, your titles, even your dreams, not to destroy you, but to free you. To remind you that beneath all of that, you are already whole. But make no mistake, this isn't a romantic process. It's agonizing. You might feel like you've lost direction. You might feel like a ghost in your own life. You might envy those still chasing shiny goals, unaware of how hollow they are. This too is part of the awakening, to see through the game and yet feel alone in that vision. Because now, the applause no longer satisfies. The awards feel empty. The praise sounds hollow. It's like you've tasted truth and nothing else will do. And that truth demands sacrifice. Jung knew that the unconscious was not some passive reservoir of dreams. It was alive, intelligent, and purposeful. And when you awaken spiritually, it begins to rewire your life, stripping away all that's false. This is why nothing motivates you now. Because your soul refuses to return to the lie. No more chasing status, no more pleasing people, no more self-abandonment. But the question remains, if the old self is dead, who am I now? Jung would say, you are not meant to answer that immediately. You are meant to live the question, to sit with the uncertainty, to allow the new self to emerge, not be engineered. And while the ego panics in this space, the soul waits patiently, because the soul knows this is the sacred void. It is the space between stories, the death of the illusion and the birth of authenticity. You are not without motivation, you are simply detoxing from false fire. And in that detox, you must learn to listen to the quiet stirrings of what wants to emerge now. Not what looks good, not what earns praise, but what aligns with your core truth, no matter how small, slow, or strange it may seem. It might begin with a whisper, a desire to walk in nature, a craving to write, a pull towards simplicity, a longing for silence. These are the new seeds, and they must be planted in stillness. You are no longer chasing a future. You are returning to yourself. And that self doesn't need to be forced into greatness. It needs to be remembered. So if you find yourself waking up without motivation, take it as a sign, not of failure, but of transformation. Your soul is no longer content with the shallow ambitions of the world. It wants something deeper, more real, more you, and that cannot be rushed. You are in the wilderness now, but the path will reveal itself, one step at a time, not through hustle, but through trust. There's a certain moment on the spiritual path where a person realizes, I no longer want what I used to want, but I also don't know what I want now. This is not laziness, it's not depression, it's not failure. It is the sacred disintegration of a life built on the wrong foundations. Carl Jung believed that most people spend the first half of their life constructing a persona, a mask to survive the world. It contains your ambition, your status, your identity, your social roles. But at some point, if you're lucky, or rather, if your soul decides you're ready, that mask begins to crack, and the light of something ancient, something real, begins to shine through. That's when the inner storm begins. You no longer feel the old spark. You wake up and wonder, what's the point? Not because life has no meaning, but because you're finally realizing that the meaning you were chasing wasn't yours. It was borrowed, imitated, conditioned. Let me ask you something personal, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever reached a goal you thought would change everything, only to feel hollow once you got it? That's not failure. That's awakening. That's your soul whispering, there's more. But here's the hard truth. This awakening isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with fireworks or clarity. It comes with confusion, loss, and emotional withdrawal. It feels like standing still while everyone else runs ahead. And that's what makes it terrifying, because the modern world doesn't reward stillness. It doesn't honor internal shifts. It worships motion, even if it's meaningless. It praises progress, even if it's toward a cliff. So, when you step back, when you slow down, when you stop forcing motivation, you become a mirror, a silent protest. And people don't like that. They'll call you lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. But they're only projecting their fear. Because deep down, a part of them knows you're onto something. You're beginning to hear your own soul. And I want to speak to you directly now. Not as a philosopher, not as a narrator, but as a fellow traveler. If this message resonates with you, if you've felt the emptiness of hollow goals, if your old ambitions no longer light you up, I invite you to pause this video just for a moment and breathe. Really breathe. Feel your body. Feel the weight of your expectations. Feel how tired you are of pretending, and now, feel the tiny flicker of truth burning beneath that. That's the real you. The part that doesn't want to impress anyone. The part that wants peace more than power. The part that's been whispering to you for years. If you've made it this far, you're not alone. There are others, silent, thoughtful, unseen, walking this path. And together, we are remembering something this world forgot. You are not here to chase. You are here to awaken. If this journey speaks to you, let me know in the comments. Share what you're going through. Your story matters. Your experience matters. You matter. Leave a comment with the word realignment if this is the phase you're in. And if you haven't yet, make sure to like this video, not for vanity, but so it reaches someone else silently suffering in this same void. We are building something rare here. A community of depth in a shallow world. And if you're still listening, you are part of it. So don't stay silent. Say something. Say anything. I read every word. You see, Carl Jung understood that true transformation isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in quietly. It begins with the loss of everything you thought you needed, and ends with the discovery of everything you truly are. This period you're in, where you feel unmotivated, disconnected, drifting, is not a dead end. It's a tunnel. And tunnels always lead somewhere, but only if you keep walking. Let go of the pressure to figure it all out. Let go of the need to be productive every moment. Let go of the shame for feeling lost. This is not regression. This is reorientation. You are not a machine that needs to function. You are a soul that longs to align. And sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is not move, to stop pushing, to sit in the ashes of your old life and wait for the sacred whisper to rise. Because when it comes, it won't sound like hustle. It won't sound like strategy. It will sound like truth, and you'll know it because your body will soften, your mind will quiet, and for the first time in a long time, you'll feel at home. Until then, stay still, stay present, stay brave. Your real life is about to begin. What if the emptiness you're feeling is not a void, but a doorway? Carl Jung once said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." But he also taught that the meaning we seek doesn't come from the world. It comes from the self. The deeper, truer self buried beneath years of programming, social masks, and unconscious wounds. This lack of motivation you're experiencing, it's not your enemy. It's a sacred invitation. An invitation to stop living through the ego and start living from the soul. The ego is what got you here. It built your ambitions. It taught you to strive, to compete, to be seen, to be significant. It crafted the image you thought would earn you love and respect. But the ego is never satisfied. Its hunger is endless. And when the soul awakens, the ego panics. Because the soul doesn't care about approval. It doesn't care about achievement. It only cares about truth. So what happens when the soul begins to take the driver's seat? You lose interest in superficial victories. You stop chasing things that never really fulfilled you. You withdraw from noise. You become still, but that stillness, that void, it's terrifying at first. You feel useless, like you've lost your edge, like you're falling behind. But you're not falling behind. You're falling inward. This is what Jung called the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious, where everything familiar dissolves. You lose the light of external motivation so you can develop the inner fire of authentic purpose, not performance, not image, but presence. This journey breaks you open. And in that brokenness, the light gets in. Let's be honest, society doesn't teach us how to navigate this. It tells us to be strong, to be productive, to set goals and grind. But what if your soul no longer wants to grind? What if your new path isn't about effort, but surrender? Surrender is not giving up. It is giving in to what's real. When you surrender the ego's endless striving, you begin to see life differently. The trees feel more alive. Silence becomes a teacher. Time slows down. You start noticing what you always missed, because you were too busy proving your worth. This is the beginning of sacred sight. And with that sight, you see what the world calls motivation is often just fear in disguise. The fear of not being enough, the fear of insignificance, the fear of stillness. But after awakening, fear can no longer drive you. You now crave alignment more than applause. This shift is radical. It changes what you value. You begin to choose depth over speed, solitude over performance, simplicity over status. And it's lonely, yes, but it's real. Because authenticity always requires aloneness, not isolation, but inner sovereignty. Carl Jung wrote extensively about individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not successful, but whole. And wholeness requires you to integrate every part of yourself. The wounded child, the false persona, the repressed anger, the forgotten dreams. You no longer want to escape yourself. You want to meet yourself. This is where the true journey begins. But make no mistake, it's not a straight line. One day you'll feel clear and aligned. The next, empty and confused. You'll question everything. You'll long for the old drive, the old hunger, even if it was killing you. But trust this, the hunger you're missing was never yours. It was installed. It was inherited. It was expected. Now, your real appetite is awakening. And it doesn't crave success. It craves meaning. It craves inner peace. It craves truth. And truth cannot be chased. It must be received. This is the paradox of post-awakening life. The more you let go, the more you receive. The less you force, the more you align. It's a different kind of motivation. Quiet, soft, intuitive. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Listen for it. It might come when you least expect, in a walk through nature, in a quiet journal entry, in a moment of grief. Suddenly, something inside you will say, "This is it. This is what I came for." And when it does, you'll move, not from pressure, but from presence. You see, the world wants to hijack your energy. It feeds off urgency, distraction, and addiction. But the soul is patient. It waits, it watches, and when you're ready, it speaks. If you're here, you're closer than you think. Maybe your motivation isn't gone. Maybe it's just changing form. You no longer want to climb the wrong ladder. You want to build something sacred. You want to serve something eternal. You want to live from your center, not your shadow. That's not weakness. That's power. But not the kind of power that controls. The kind of power that liberates. Liberates you from the lies. Liberates you from the noise. Liberates you from the old version of you that was never really you. Carl Jung didn't promise comfort on this path, but he promised transformation. And the moment you trust that your lack of motivation is actually the death of who you're not, and the birth of who you truly are, you begin to walk with a different posture. Not rushed, not frantic, but grounded, aware, unshakable. So don't rush back to the hustle. Don't betray this sacred void. It's shaping you. Stay here, listen, trust. Something ancient is waking up inside you. There's a moment in every spiritual journey when you look around and realize you've outgrown the life you built, not because you failed, but because you evolved. And with that evolution comes a sacred disorientation, a season of stillness, a silence so heavy it feels like the world has abandoned you. But what if that silence is not a punishment? It's preparation. Carl Jung believed that real transformation doesn't come from adding more, but from dissolving what no longer serves. And what's being dissolved now is your old identity, your old desires, your old engine. This is why you don't feel motivated, because you're not meant to return to who you were. You're being called to become someone you've never been. And becoming someone new requires more than effort. It requires death. Not physical death, but psychological death. The death of the ego's illusions. The part of you that chased admiration, validation, status, even if it meant self-betrayal, is dying. And something deeper is emerging. Something slower, quieter, more real. But realness doesn't scream, it doesn't strive, it doesn't push. It waits, it watches. And when you are still enough to hear it, you remember. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is soul recalibration. You're being stripped of false fuel so you can ignite from within. You're being emptied so that something holy can fill you. The old motivation came from fear. Fear of insignificance. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being enough. The new energy comes from alignment, not with the world, but with the self. And once you align with that, your movements become magnetic. You no longer chase. You attract. You no longer beg. You embody. You no longer perform. You presence. But let me be clear. This path is not for the faint of heart. This is the razor's edge between madness and liberation. It's lonely, because few choose it, but those who do, awaken. Not to comfort, but to clarity. Not to pleasure, but to purpose. Not to noise, but to knowing. You begin to see that the system was never designed to nurture your soul. It was built to exploit your energy. And when you no longer give it that energy, it will call you unmotivated, lazy, lost. But what they call lost, Jung called individuation, a return to wholeness. And wholeness does not always look like success. Sometimes it looks like letting go of everything you once thought you needed, and realizing you're still enough. So if you're standing in that space right now, that void, that confusion, that stillness, honor it. Don't rush back to the noise. Don't resurrect your false self just because the world applauds it. Wait, because what's coming is not just another goal to chase, it's a new center to live from. And from that center, everything changes. You begin to speak differently, think differently, feel differently. Not because you've added more, but because you've shed what was never you. You become calm in chaos, grounded in uncertainty, alive in silence. This is what real power feels like. Not loud, not flashy, but immovable. So I ask you now, not as a performer on a stage, but as a fellow traveler in the dark. If something in you feels like it's dying, let it. You are not losing your life. You are losing your lie. And what remains after the lie dissolves is something no one can take from you. Not fame, not followers, not even motivation, but presence, purpose, and peace. This is your awakening. It doesn't always look like light. Sometimes it looks like ashes, but from those ashes, something eternal is being born. If this message resonates with you, if it touched something raw and real within you, I want you to do something small, but powerful. Share this with someone who's in the dark, someone who thinks they've lost their spark. Let them know the fire isn't gone, it's becoming sacred. Like this video if you felt seen. Comment with a word, just one, that captures where you are in your journey. And most importantly, subscribe to Psychra, because this space is not for the fake, the fast, or the shallow. It's for those who are ready to go all the way in, to peel back the masks, to walk through the void, to emerge, reborn. So join us, not for more noise, But for more truth, this is where psychology meets soul, where illusion ends and the self begins, where your motivation may fade, but your purpose begins to burn. Stay awake, stay aware, and as Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But now, you know better, and knowing is the beginning of freedom. Welcome home.